Morning, everybody. As Jinhua presented, and actually I'm very lucky to, well, maybe not lucky to follow Daniela's great presentation, but as part of our research in M3S, our group T1 is focused on towards an immersive workplace. We're going to focus a little bit on our work that is connecting this embodied AI approach. We're going to have a three-part presentation. We're going to start with me. I'm going to have Ila and Dulanga. And most of the things I'm going to be talking about actually are the work of a postdoc of us, Alexander Almergoin. He's not here. I think he's on the other room. So hi, Alex, from the other room. Basically, our conversation here today is that we want humans and robots and AI agents to interact. And more, we realize that humans, we speak in a very ambiguous, not very clear way. And if we want our tasks to be fully comprehend, then these systems need to fully understand the way we communicate, rather than us adapting to the way they understand. That can actually make all these new tasks be removed from our backlog, like things that are very repetitive or even dangerous. But our main interest in my side is that we can take all the knowledge that we have and then transfer that to these AI systems or robots, so they can also help us maybe in the future learn for the future generations. So when we think about embodied AI, we found like these three pillars: learning, thinking, and sensing. We're going to focus on the learning and the thinking. My side is mainly on the learning aspect of it. And I want to start thinking a little bit about how do you master a task. So how many people here have been in competitive sports? Raise your hands. Anybody plays like an instrument and has been, having one of those tutors that are very into you learning and being better, or learning arts or singing? And again, you have like somebody that is pushing you to become better. Anybody? Raise your hands. Actually, a good number. The question will be, how do you become this kind of expert? How do you become good at it? Anybody has any thoughts? Please just yell it out.
10,000 hours.
Practice? Okay. Anything different to practice that comes to your mind? Coaching. Good. Shadowing. Great. Yeah, I'm very lucky you all kind of nail it. Like, practice makes perfect. That's something people tend to say. I will say if you repeat it, yeah, it gives you to some level, but you really need to challenge yourself to become better. It's not just like going to the gym and lift the same weight for 20 years. You're not going to improve your muscles. You're not going to grow them. You're going to stay there, right? So you need to challenge yourself a little bit more. And thank you, because coaching is another very important element. Coaching is having somebody, most likely an expert in the field, that can actually match you and become your opponent, sort of speaking, but at a challenging level. So you start practicing and put yourself to the limit, but also to a level that is not so challenging that you feel frustrated, but also not so simple that you get bored, right? Our research, what is focused, is on how to transmit this kind of expertise. So we're talking about learning, but that learning is not only from humans, it's also for AI and for machines and robots. And I'm separating it from like two layers. One is we need to understand how do we do these tasks? And Daniela was very on point when she was talking about the liquid networks focusing on learning the task itself rather than the context. But the other aspect later is how do we transmit this information to the learner? That could be beginner. Also, if you have an expert, how do you support that expert? Because sometimes tasks require this extra support. And so we can have a learner as an AI system, or even a worker. You can mimic that as a robot, for example. And around all these topics is how do we transmit that information? So our work is being focusing now a lot of augmented reality, and I think all the three of us will be talking about that. So just to give you an idea is that we'll have these lenses that show us our environment, the visual field that we have. But as we move around, things change their location, right? So if I'm looking at, is it on? I'm looking at Jinhua right here. He's in front of me. If I have my augmented reality goggles, he's right in front of me. But if I start talking to a log, now Jinhua is not actually in front of me. Now he's a log. So I need to ground his presence in my 3D environment. So we're going to start talking about grounding 3D objects. In this case, I'm grounding Jinhua. He's actually on my left. So I need a system that allows me to pinpoint his presence in my 3D virtual environment as I move around. That's a very important concept that you're going to see we're working on. So just to give you a couple of examples of, okay, how do we learn about these tasks? So we need to collect a lot of data, and we're talking about expertise, right? So as an example, I have this little, can you turn it down, volume? Thank you. I don't need any sound. We have an expert reviewing at these objects, the dome at MIT, and they have some flaws. The expert knows where to look at, and you can see the red dot is the attention, the visual field. And later we can show these to a naive learner that wants to understand how to figure out what the flaws are. And you can see the heat map. Blue is low attention, and the white dot is showing you where most of the attention of the expert is focused on. You can even not only show this to a human, you can train an AI system to detect these flaws in this kind of object. So we're collecting data about this attention that gives us a little bit of this idea of expertise. Now, this is information that is not explicit. So we're trying to transform this implicit knowledge into explicit knowledge that is quantifiable. Now, why we move from the person into the environment? So we can collect data about the task itself by also adding sensors to all the surroundings and the tools and the objects you're interacting with. So we use as an example the glass blowing task. And this is a very tricky activity that requires a lot of years of expertise, and you shadow, as somebody mentioned, the expert. And this is actually a task that requires two people working, the gaffer that collects the glass and also the assistant that is helping with the tools. Let me show you an example of how this works. Like in this example, we have an expert that has their attention, that red circle is looking at the glass most of the time. It's a very hard skill to nail when you're a beginner, but we're also collecting data from the rod that is holding the glass. It's giving the deceleration, that is the circle disc at the bottom right. We also have the tilt of the whole rod that looks like a match on the left, and we have the air that is the intake into the pipe, and that's the green square that you will see in the top middle. So we're collecting all this information, not only the attention of the expert, but also metrics of their performance. And the idea is that we will be able also to quantify how good you're at a specific task by comparing these metrics between an expert and a beginner. It can help us now to create like systems, AI, or even robots that can take you as a beginner into the expertise phase, but not only having this human that is an expert and very busy, and it's hard to find that kind of qualified person around, but the AI can learn all of this information, and they probe you when it's collecting your performance metrics. It can push you to be better and tell you where you're making the mistake, sort of like the way the coaching of the mentor is trying to do. But overall, we could even train the AI in general to replicate this task, right? So this is basically information we're collecting about how to perform the task. Now we need to actually present that information in a way, right? Explain it to the human or to the AI system. The idea is, how do we train properly the learner, or how do we support this worker in the context of a specific task that is very cognitive demanding, or you have the AI system or the robot, right? So we have the data, but also then later we need to present it. And as I explained with the example with Jinhua, we need to really ground the objects, because the activities, the tasks, require not only instruction of how to do it, but also what objects are involved. And after you do that, since we're talking about the augmented reality context, you need to provide the right figures, images that convey those actions. We call these the overlays that are going to be on the 3D system. So from now, I'm going to show you very quickly some details that are in posters on the other room. You can go and look at those. I'm just going to focus a little bit on the videos because they're way more fun to do, and I don't want to take a lot of time. But basically, there are two approaches we're doing. One is, how do we ground this system so we can find small instruments or tools, because most of the algorithms right now for 3D objects, finding them in this environment are basically big chairs, sofas, tables. But if we want to talk about finding a screwdriver, it's very hard. So the approach that has been taken in the lab is we focus on the 2D objects, that we find them in that space, and we do this kind of approach, like basically focusing on an approach that has been already explored for a while and is being mastered, is finding objects into the images. That's very easy. Then we translate that into the 3D space of the augmented reality, and we can properly situate it. I think maybe you will talk a little bit more of that later. That's one of the posters that is in the back. So now we can ground these objects in space. Thank you. But now we want to present the actions related to those objects to explain the task. And for that, we need to create actions or figures that allow us to convey those actions. And this is another work that is focused on these free-form 3D overlays. And basically, the whole point is using LLMs to have a specific task that create these images that explain better the action that the person needs to do. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of the videos explaining how this is happening. Let me help that. The overlay here is just telling you how to place this blue block on the blue X, the blue cross, and this is happening in real time. And after that, it's supposed to tell you that the yellow block is going to that yellow location. So it's identifying both the block and the target, that is the X arrow, and that is giving you the instruction using the overlay that is being automatically created. In this case, it's placing on top. And you can see the action is a little bit different to the one, and it can move around as your AR system is changing too. Similar for like rotate counterclockwise, then you're following the actions, or creating like a tower. And it's just giving you the instruction. So overall, it's creating all of this in real time, and it's very flexible because the tasks and the commands are not small as with the regular AR system that just have some arrows and they have maybe some highlighting, but it's very flexible and it can give you very different options to do it. To summarize, just want to connect a little bit of the work we've been doing here about how do we learn, how do we present what we're learning, is that this way of transfer knowledge that we're focusing on is we're able to collect data and expertise, making implicit knowledge explicit, but also instrumenting the tools and all the workplace that a personal learner is experiencing. We're able to ground all these objects that are related to the task and then present you information with a clear overlays in this augmented reality environment. All of these different pieces that I show you are a little bit disconnected. Our next steps is to actually get a pipeline of all these activities in a specific task, like repairing the fuel valve of a motor engine. In this case, we've been collaborating with Synergy Marine, or do maintenance for the engine in a ship. So that's the next step that we're going to move forward. And I'm going to pass it on to Ila.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ila. I'm a postdoc with SMART, with the team that is working on immersive workplaces. Now, if you recall the first image that we showed, or the first slide that we showed a couple of scenarios where robots might be working with each other, or robots might be working with other humans in a sort of codependent, interdependent manner. And that could be in the factories of the future, that could be in the workplaces of the future, that could also be in your own houses. So if we want to achieve that vision, what are the three different things that a system might have to do? So one of the things that Andres has already covered is this idea of learning. If you want robots to learn how to integrate with humans in their environments, then what are the things that need to be translated for robotic platforms? So what I'm going to be focusing on with my colleague Dulanga is this idea of thinking and sensing. So some of the works that we are doing is understanding higher level abstract instructioning. Make me a salad, go pick up that bottle, go water your friend, right? As Daniela showed. So what is context? What is possible? What is common sense? Understanding these things. And then, of course, from a computer vision or a system side of things, how do you do the 3D, multimodal 3D grounding that Andres mentioned? So I'm going to be talking about one of the works that we are looking at, which is task planning for dynamic environments. Now, when you have robots and humans working together in unconstrained environments, things are going to be moving around, changing. A lot of objects in your environment are going to be changing state as time goes along. So what does that look like in a systems perspective? So if you look at this idea of embodied AI and an intelligent embodied agent, there are different pillars and different areas of research that people have been working on. So this idea of task planning is, of course, it falls here under an embodied agent, which is able to understand the environment, able to interact with the environment. But it does build on certain pillars that are foundational to it. So embodied perception, understanding the environment, having some sort of active visual exploration. You're searching for a knife in the kitchen. Where is it? These kind of questions that embodied perception has to answer. Where are the things in the environment? Then once you've understood the environment, how do you interact with it? Asking questions about the environment. Is this sharp knife? Is this knife sharp? Is this knife dull? And so then how do I interact with it accordingly? And then lastly, once I've understood where my objects are, what I am to do with it, once I've interacted with the environment, how do I go about an abstract task a human has assigned me? So some amount of task planning. And so that's where we come in. Our sort of motivational scenario is where we have an opportunity in like maybe a commercial kitchen or an office pantry where we have a lot of robots that are preparing meals for office goers. Can we ask them, hey, can you make me a grilled chicken sandwich? And the robot is immediately able to say, oh yeah, these are all the things that are available to me, all the kitchen implements, all the ingredients, and this is the plan I'm going to follow. So that's the first idea that as a team we are looking at, high-level task planning and adapting to dynamic environments. And then the second part is, as things change, change their state in the environment, how can you have task-specific perception optimization in uncertain environments? So, naturally, when you are working with other people, when robots are working with each other, they have to be adaptive to each other, some sort of social behavior. So how do we sort of enable that by having, a robot focus on what's important to the task that it's been given? So some amount of perception optimization. So what we have been looking at is a systems level focus. So now you would have heard from Daniela, like liquid networks, that's a model perspective of looking at things. So if we were to step back and say, okay, is there a systems approach to this? So what we have said is, when a human gives a robot a task, can we break it down into its components? And then can we allow a robot to say, oh, this is what is changing in the environment. I want to have some sort of reflexive reactions to those changes so that I don't say, oh, something's changed. I don't know what needs to be done to react to this change, and I fail. So one of the ideas is that contingency planning via VLMs. Can we have some sort of common sense reasoning for the main task that's been given, some sort of analysis of what's changing in the dynamic environment, and so therefore, can I have some quick reflexive reactions to react to those changes without saying, oh, this is a scenario that I have not been trained for, and so I will stop in my task execution. So some amount of contingency planning. And then, you would have heard that models like GPT and so on, they have an amount of hallucination. They have, a lot of ideas that we might ask it to come up with are not really grounded in physical reality. So can we have, from a systems perspective, a safety net for what plans or what task analysis, what sort of common sense reasoning that a robot does, is it really grounded in reality? Now, if you look at the literature, there have been many classical ways of doing this in the past. And so can we bring that into the fore when we are looking at common sense reasoning along with, VLMs? And then lastly, when we are having a dynamic environment in front of us, can we react to it without, like I said, having full replanning or saying I have failed in this scenario? So I see that something has changed in the environment. I look at my contingency plans, what have I sensed in the environment before, what have I created contingency plans for, and then can I execute that without really failing in the task. So this is a very high-level overview of what we have been looking at from a thinking perspective. It also translates into sensing because it allows us the opportunity to say, okay, I only want to focus on the gas stove at this time, so any other stimulation in the background is not really important to me. So how can we decide what is important, and then how can we just focus on that? So that's where our sensing or efficient sensing for pervasive execution comes in, and Dulanga will take over for that.
Thank you, Ila. So I'm Dulanga. I'm also a postdoc working on the T1. So coming back to this same slide. So I'll be focusing a lot more on the thinking side of it, and specifically one of the approaches that Andres mentioned of the visual grounding. So let's say you are wearing a HoloLens, wearing a smart glass, and then you are translating among different fields of view. You are here, then you are seeing Prof. Jinwa here, but when you move around here, you are not right now seeing Prof. Jinwa, you are right now seeing Andres. So you need to translate among different field of views, and you also need to understand what the instruction is. So just motivating the scenario of visual grounding. So let's take this particular example here. Pick up that large box in the shelf. So in order to understand this particular instruction, you need to do something called a situated comprehension. In other words, identify the target object that is being referred by the human query. or the instruction relative to the current field of view. So this particular task is actually called 2D grounding. So in the same manner, you need to translate among different fields of view. You are here, you are seeing a different field of view, you need to translate to a different viewpoint. So you need to do something called 3D spatial awareness, or else to translate across different fields of view to provide something we call as the accurate 3D primitives. This is also termed as 3D understanding. So it turns out that you can do this both tasks at the same time, then it is called 3D visual grounding. And when you do that, what you can actually do is you can directly reason using 3D point clouds, something that is in the LiDARs when you reason in the viewpoint. So the idea is that there is a 3D point cloud, as you can see in this case, and there's a person who's pointing at a particular object, and there's a language description as well. So idea is that how can you identify the target object in the 3D space accurately using the combination of visual, gestural, and language cues. So this is one of the works that I have been working on, which was accepted at CVPR this year. So we came up with this benchmark dataset called ImputeRefer. So the idea is that we took existing point cloud scenes and attached, we generated an avatar and generated a pointing gesture, and we kind of inserted into an existing point cloud scene to generate something called the ImputeRefer dataset. So with this, we came up with a large-scale dataset of around 35,000 samples and around 9,000 testing samples to come up with this categorization of different scene environments. So the idea is that there are two specific cases, which is called unique and the multiple scenario, where there are in the unique and the multiple. Specifically, there are multiple objects in the multiple scenario, and in the unique scenario, there is only one particular object with the same class that matches that particular instruction. So the other classification is based on the distance. So let's say you are pointing here to an object that is across the room, then the distance is much higher. And in the personal scenario, the distance between the object and the human is close by. So with this, we came up with this model called Guess3Week. So I'll not go into the details of the technical details of the model, but the idea is that you have a end-to-end model that can directly reason from the point cloud, the language description, and to understand the specific location of the object. So the idea is that with this particular model, we kind of beat the existing benchmarks on the existing work on 3D visual grounding, and we achieved state-of-the-art results. So this is our team. So I'm just acknowledging all the team members, and that's it. Any questions?